So what a wonderful, luminous, marvelous, brave film.
Thank you.
But my first question for you: why is a Iranian-born American filmmaker who doesn't speak Russian doing a majestic film about a closed Russian nuclear city?
Well, I'm Iranian. What else do you expect me to get into? So
No, but seriously,
that's in our DNA. No, it's because for me, I started film. I don't have a story. I have a question. So the question for me was really the whole. It's actually still today. There is this threat of nuclear terrorism by a non-state actor, not a state, but a terrorist group. So for me, the question was really: is this realistic? Can a non-state individual like Al Qaeda or ISIS these days that have replaced them basically, can they actually access a nuclear bomb? And I'm not talking about dirty bomb or a nuclear device, but what we see on TV or the media, showing us mushroom clouds after showing this scary looking guys. So for me, the question became, if I were a terrorist and if I wanted to get my hands on enough material, could I actually pose a real threat and could I actually do it? So that was the question for me. And really being Iranian born, of course, I live in exile with my family in California. But it's still, I wanted to know if that is really a threat that we should worry about.
It's sort of fascinating at the beginning of the film when you see people sneaking in. I don't know how much you can tell us, but how did you sneak in? How did you move around Azursk without being clocked by the FSB and dumped in a cell? Did you have a bag over your head? I mean, how did you do it?
I can't tell you about how we got in, but I can tell you how we moved around. So we obviously when we got there, we stayed in a sanitarium outside of the city, in a forest, and we made contact because we knew it's impossible to get in. Even to sneak in, it was impossible. We needed help from people from inside. So we needed to make that contact with the residents from inside who would actually help us to get in. And so skipping forward, then what happened was that what you see in the film, you see B-roll, which is like in the crowded areas, and people moving around the marketplace or the theater or the hospital and some of the stuff inside Mayak. And then you see the interviews that are either in a remote part of the city by the lake that nobody was around, which I could, easily do. But what I actually decided to do, because it was very, very important for me that that my audience would be able to understand the reality of these people, their everyday reality, and so I asked those residents who decided to help us, I said to them, if you were able to write a letter to the people from outside, who live outside, and they have no idea about your city, and you want to introduce your city, and instead of using words, instead of using a letter, you use imagery, and can you go around and introduce them to your city by images? And they came back with some of the most amazing, most fascinating images that you see. And what was fascinating was, it was two things. One was that it was important for me as a storyteller, because I'm not a journalist, I'm a storyteller. And I don't want to discredit myself sitting next to you, but it was very, very important, the whole concept of authentic eye. So I wanted to make sure, because even if I had the opportunity and I wouldn't be arrested the second I would have a camera outside, I wouldn't be able to convey to you with the authentic eye what these people experience every day and what is their emotional and psychological feeling and connection to the city. So that was very important for me, the unfiltered. The camera, it does filter certain amount, but still it was the least filter way of getting their emotional connection to the city, to the outside. And the other thing was that they agreed to do it, and that was fascinating for me, that they agreed to do it.
So the people who helped you film, the people who lived there, I mean, who would you consider the heroes of this?
I think
story?
They are all heroes. We have, of course, for me, the main character of the film is the city. The city is the main character. We enter this zone, which is basically almost like a Twilight Zone, a science fiction almost. They seem to live on a different dimension from us. They have different concept of reality, different concept of time, different concept of philosophy, and everything. But of course, the main voice is Nadashda. Who is absolutely one of the bravest women I have, or persons I have ever met. And and unfortunately, you see what happens to her at the end. But it is everybody else who decided to help, and you couldn't see their faces, and they didn't want to really face the camera. And I don't think, and I asked one of them, I said, they're going to recognize you even if we cover your face and we change your voice, and you have decided to talk. And I couldn't understand this. I said, but why then wouldn't you want people to see your face? And that's when I actually realized that I am asking questions from a completely different concept of reality and a concept of understanding what it means to the understanding of their mentality, because they're still very much, they have it's a continuation of the Soviet Union, and they have lived behind barbed wire fences, and that's their identity. So I don't want to say paranoia, but for them, they're not supposed to talk. They have always been told that they would be actually killed. So because of the sensitivity of the place and Mayak and what they're doing there. But what I realized is that you have this physical, visible barbed wire fences, which are actually double. I never knew what double barbed wire fences or looked like. So that was very interesting to me. But then if you take the risk and you say, okay, the worst that can happen to me, they shoot me in the head. You can go over any fence that you want. So, but the most challenging is once you're inside, there are invisible fences, psychological fences that these people have built through the last 60 years, 50 years, and prior to that through Soviet Union. So this is the most challenging one, the psychological invisible fences that you cannot break through. And it has to be their decision. And I don't know what was that click. There was a click that they decided to talk.
I mean, this is a slightly tough question, but I wonder with Nadezhda, as you saw at the end of the film, when I first saw it, you had a slightly different ending, but subsequently she was forced to basically flee the country and is now stuck in France with her kids. Do you feel at all responsible or even guilty for what happened to her?
No.
Why not?
Because she had made a choice to basically go on a crusade. That's the only word I can think of, and really try to help people whom she felt that their rights were being violated, including herself, including her own family, and not just the human rights, but also they were victims of being exposed to nuclear contamination and radioactive, being close to Mayak. So she decided to help these people. And for as long as she was living in the city, and she had her office, and she would go to court, and the FSB, they were harassing her. They were harassing her kids at the kindergarten. They were harassing her family. It ended her marriage, and she is an extremely tough woman, and she knew what she was doing, and she knew, and they had arrested her before, they had questioned her before, and she knew the consequences. It's one thing if it was somebody who would take steps without knowing the consequences. So if, for instance, you would say to me, would you feel guilty for my children if you would have been shot or killed? You were not a responsible mother. Would you? No. I'm saying you could say that also, but I made a decision, a clear, informed decision that this is what I want to do, and I think she's educated, she's very smart, and she's very determined to help. And as you know, in Russia, it has consequences. And I think what happened to her, as long as they allowed her to do what she was doing, as long as she remained local, they said, okay, you do what you're doing. They bothered her, they harassed her, and the level would go up and down depending on how aggressive or assertive she was. But the moment that she started taking what was her activities, which was local, and started putting the city outside on the map. The city is no longer a secret. It hasn't been a secret for a long time, but it's still forbidden. And Russia, they don't want you to talk about this, obviously, for various reasons, political and and the their whatever they're doing in Mayak right now. So the fact that she put there is one line which for me is a key line, which the local journalist says when he talks about the episode that happened with his father, that he went on a train and the guy next to him asked him a lot of questions, and he said, the guy turned to his father and he said, good for you, you didn't say anything about our town because our town does not accept traitors. And I think that is a key thing that makes Azersk today, for me, a microcosm of Russia.
Interesting. Talking of traitors, I mean, one aspect that really fascinated me was the whole Litvinenko dimension. I've just done a book on Litvinenko, which came out a couple of months ago, and you touched that in the film, but what you don't say explicitly is that we now know, thanks to the public inquiry last year, that the polonium used to kill Alexander Litvinenko, who spoke at this club, originated from Azovsk and Mayak. In other words, there was a production chain from Mayak to another polonium production facility in a place called Sarov. Then it was taken to Moscow, where it was weaponized and given to these two goons, Lugovoy and Koftin, who then murdered Litvinenko at the Millennium Hotel, about 2 miles from here. Were the things that you were told about the Litvinenko case which you couldn't put in the film?
I personally didn't ask about Litvinenko, and I was very surprised when the scientists who worked at Mayak started talking about it, and I let him say whatever he wanted to say, and what he said, and what's interesting when they talk, they say more than they want to say. And so what he said was very, very interesting for me, because Litvinenko in itself for me wasn't interesting. It wasn't the story. What he said was, he said quite a bit. What I would like to share with you, and I can share with you, is that he said that I asked him why they killed him. They put polonium-210 in his tea. Why tea? Why didn't they kill him the old-fashioned way, push him in front of a train, shoot him in the head, and pretend, make it look like it wasn't suicide or an accident? And he said, what we know now, that Putin wanted to give a very clear message, not just to the British government and the British people, but also to the Western governments. And I said, well, what is the message? And actually, we have what Putin says. He says it himself: "Don't mess with us. You're better off not messing with us." And he said because Putin had asked the British government a few times to have Litvinenko extradited. And the British government had refused. So why polonium-210 in his tea? He explained to me polonium-210 is one of the most, as most dangerous and rare fatal radioactive poisons, and it's produced in a couple of places. And he said it's one of the hardest things to actually fatal to actually carry. So it takes a whole operation to just be able to carry it through borders. So what Putin, he said, wanted to tell the British government, the British people, and also the European governments is that if you mess with us, we will mess back with you, that your borders are not safe. And we can get through to the heart of London, the most dangerous, the most poisonous radioactive polonium-210, and put it in the tea. Tea, he said, symbolically was very important to use because it's the British drink.
Yeah.
And he said, what he wanted to say, to convey, is that your government cannot protect you. And also the last thing that he said this was also a message to the British economy. Can you imagine if you put that in your tea, what happens to the British economy? And another thing, and I didn't want to, and he actually explained and he gave evidence, which I decided not to put in the film because I didn't want to contribute to what he said Putin wanted to do, which was cause public hysteria, public fear. And that's why I decided not to put 99% of the stuff. But what he said was that it really is about creating this sense of, we can get back at you, your government cannot protect you. And one thing that he said, and I'm not sure if I should say that, but he said one of the things that they were talking about was to actually put it on banknotes and distribute it to the banks, and
it is extraordinary if you think about the other kind of famous case, which is the Georgy Markov case in 1978. It was as if the Russian state and its Soviet predecessor are using the emblems of Britishness, as weapons. Cup of tea and then a brolly. I mean, what could be more British than that? I'm going to throw it open to questions in a moment, but before I do that, I just want to ask you one last thing, which is that. I mean, we're going in a fairly sinister direction here. You were showing your documentary at Sheffield, and basically it was all mangled. It didn't really work.
It broke in the 2.5 minutes.
Was that a technical failure, or do you think there could be a more spooky explanation, given the well-known capacity of Russia for kind of professional hacking and mischief making?
Well, the same thing actually happened in Canada. The exact same thing happened. So I would love to actually say, well, it's the Russians, they're after me, they don't want this film to be seen. But the explanation was that it was technical problems, even though we had checked, they had checked, both in Toronto when we had our premiere in Toronto, our North American, and here they had checked. And my executive producer, who sat very patiently with me, it just broke 2.5 minutes, and then they played a DVD that was all cracked. It was just a painful experience for me as a filmmaker to sit through that.
Okay, let's have some questions. If you don't mind, I'm going to start with the gentleman at the back there, because that's actually Professor. I'll come to you in a moment. He's Professor Norman Dombey, who's the world expert on polonium and nuclear reactors. Well, a world expert.
I just wanted to comment on what Samira was saying. Sorry. I just wanted to comment on what Samira was saying, because her informants, although I'm sure he was terribly well meaning, didn't seem to know too much of what he was talking about. polonium is not a fissile material, as he said in the film. Plutonium and uranium are fissile materials, not polonium. Polonium is called a byproduct material. Mayak was connected with Litvinenko as Luch says, the material was irradiated at Mayak, but that was it. Spent fuel, highly radioactive spent fuel rods would have been taken by truck probably, or train from Mayak to Sarov, where the polonium was produced. Sarov is another closed city, like Mayak, but it's Sarov that Litvinenko, the polonium which killed Litvinenko really came from, although Mayak has a subsidiary part. And the third thing about Putin and Litvinenko and so on, in fact, I don't think it was like that. Polonium was two tones, a perfect poison, perfect because nobody should have detected it. So it wasn't meant to be a signal to anyone, the British people especially. It was meant to have been a mysterious death. And the FSB had actually...
Norman, speaking to the microphone.
Sorry, the FSB had actually practiced that. And they had given a cup of tea with polonium to a Chechen back in 2006, because they weren't going to use that polonium abroad before they had tested it at home. So it shouldn't have been, if it hadn't been, Litvinenko was meant to have died a mysterious death with nobody knowing what was happening, nobody knowing what was killed him, by a combination of factors, and because London was involved, polonium-210 was discovered, and that was because there were very good hospitals, very good health and safety executive, and Aldermaston, all within 50 miles.
Okay, thank you very much. There's a question here at the front. Sorry.
Can I just respond to that? Because, yes, let me respond to Norman, please. Two things. Your first thing that you're saying that the nuclear scientist who was a former Mayak worker didn't know what he was talking about. I take responsibility for that because, we have long hours of interviews, and then we have to cut it in order and cut and paste in order to make a narrative that makes sense. So if he was talking at some point about fissile material, and then I had to cut to polonium, it's not his fault, it's my fault, and my lack of knowledge that polonium is not fissile material. So I take complete responsibility for that. And the second thing is that you said they actually wanted him to die a mysterious death. There were many other ways that they could have killed him and nobody would have known. I think the fact that they used polonium-210 is a very significant political message, and because there are how many, I can give you 20 ways of killing. I mean, I don't know. Sorry, I take that back. Someone, Luke can give you, he wrote a book about that. So Luke can give you 20 ways of killing somebody without...
But you need to do
okay, all right. I tell you what. No, we'll keep going for now. We'll convene. I'm sorry, a question in the front row. Yeah.
You asked me to comment on the basis of my experience, so I have to comment on that. My father's roommate at Harvard, ran the Berkeley Rad Lab. I was brought up with a scientist who built the atomic bomb in America. I've written a book on the subject. I've written scripts on the subject. And the irony of it was that one of the directors that saw it, Pontecorvo, his brother had defected to the Russians. And he said, I have to show it to my brother first. And he went and showed it. And the Russians made an answer film, which came out in the late 1980s. But I mean, this talk of Litvinenko is totally distracting from the accomplishment of your film.
Thank you.
Your film is not about the Cold Cold War, which doesn't exist any longer. I mean, when we hacked into the Atomic Energy Agency at Article 1986, there have been 850 serious accidents that had not been reported. Snowden, and I think you rather, and the Nadezhda as being like Snowden and Assange. You're the publisher. She's the person who breached the security screen. The security screen is everywhere. It's most developed in America. Snowden and NSA is all a development of the security screen that developed around the atomic bomb project. It still exists. I mean, you only have a very small list of hidden cities. Vanunu spent 18 years in prison for revealing the Israeli project. That is a hidden thing. They've now put it underground because it's been violated. The English have security. There's submarines everywhere. Your film, why is such a great, great film? I mean, you want to, I think this is being recorded. I've seen at least 50 films on this subject, and this is the best of them. But it's the best of them not because it's referring to Litvinenko, which is irrelevant to this. It's because it's referring to the strategic balances and 50 years of nuclear security screens, lying, cheating, and the miserable people who were poisoned by it. And half the scientists at Los Alamos were fiddling about with plutonium also and died of cancer. Oppenheimer fed me. They were all exposed. It happened in Israel. It's happened in every country. The same people you have on that screen are in India. I mean, I met them outside Ashkelon prison when Vanunu was released. They're in America. They've had prison problems there. They've been persecuted. Snowden sitting in Russia. I think people should be asking, how were you allowed actually to make the film in Russia? I think the Russians, during the Gorbachev period, were actually trying to open up. A Russian general sat in the Nevada proving grounds and said, I can't believe I'm watching an American nuclear test. They were commenting on the fact that they wanted to get rid of the whole thing, that their warheads were sticking out of warehouse windows. I mean, this is not the Litvinenko story. I mean, this is the project, the product of people trying to recreate the Cold War. This is not the Cold War. The Russians are being threatened. The Americans are being threatened. There's a lot of fear around. And for whatever reasons, you can't comment on the Iranian project. That is also another secured project, Stuxnet, and whatever.
Okay, so
how did the Russians allow
how the Russians allow you to make it?
They did not.
For letting you do this.
They did not allow me to do this. I went. I think the when I came back, I thought about how I got actually. I wasn't scared when I was there, and I just got into a different zone, probably mentally and emotionally. But I got scared when I got back, and because I realized that I got some footage that. I wasn't sure how I could actually create a narrative that historically and politically and in a human way would be helpful, and would have meaning, because I had to actually think about and rethink and I cut the film 3 times from scratch, and the reason was because I had to rethink the whole concept of reality and the whole concept of truth, because what I realized, and I think I was able to do it because I'm a non-entity. I'm not Michael Moore. Nobody knows me. I can blend in. So because I didn't speak the language, there was no facial expression that I would be scared when people were talking around me, whatever they were saying. I'm just like, I wouldn't respond. There was no fear on my face because I couldn't understand what they were saying. So I think a lot of my inexperience came to my advantage to be able to do what I did and what I was able to get here. But I think what I really tried to do for my audience, and it was extremely important for me, was when these people's reality is abstract to us. And if somebody tells me, when you come to Toronto and it is -40 in February and I'm going from LA, I understand it intellectually, but I don't understand it in terms of my experience because I don't have the experience. So it's abstract to me, the reality that is being explained to me. So once I go to Toronto, -40, I experience it, so that reality, the abstract, is out. And so what became very important for me is that I understood that the reality of these people for my audience here or wherever they might be is abstract. My challenge as a storyteller was, how do I take the abstract out of the reality and bring it to you? And I realized based on the whole thing of with Coke, that reality is shared experience. How do I bring that reality and make it shared experience with you so that you can actually relate and understand it, and the abstraction goes out of the thing. And the other thing was that I had to do it the second time that I was cutting, that I realized, okay, I'm taking the abstract out of reality, but the truth still for my audience has no meaning. They can tell all this truth is their truth, but I realized that I'm going to fail at the end of the day, because truth without meaning will fall on its face. So I realized the only way I can actually convey that reality and that truth to you is it's only when it comes from heart to heart.
Right.
It is when it's human story, and and I got that in the third cut, and I'm talking each cut took me a year of reflection and cutting and recutting and recutting, and I realized actually the only thing that all of us, it's universal, and it connects us without any language, you don't have religion or regardless of anything, is vulnerability. So when you see Nadia in the beginning pushing her child in a stroller, and her kid doesn't want to eat, and she's in that setting, you immediately feel she's vulnerable, and we are emotionally connected. And once this connection starts, and we are connected through that vulnerability, then I think the reality, it becomes shared experience for us, and the truth gets its meaning.
Okay, let's take some more questions. We might try and take two, so one here and then one here, or perhaps we'll take two questions together. That'd be great. Yeah.
Hi, I have a very short question. It's over here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Has anyone in the city seen the film? And if yes, what did they think of it?
Okay, just hang on for that. We'll just take one more here as well. The gentleman with the bit. Yeah.
Hi. At the beginning of the film, you said that she'd been charged under the Foreign Agents Law, and I'm just interested because typically that law is applied when people have been receiving funding from abroad. Was that purely because she'd been cooperating with you on the documentary, or has she been cooperating with any other foreign organizations? And, connected to that, previous to this film, had she been previously tried to do any kind of advocacy, trying to make the issue known outside of Russia? And how easy is it for people in Ozeas to contact, the outside world, by which I mean outside of Russia, not just outside of the town? Thank you.
Right. So I'll answer your question first. No one inside the city has seen the film, and I'm trying to get a copy of the film to Nadia, who is in France. She hasn't seen it yet, and partly because it's my fault. But the reason people in the city, they haven't seen the film, they have internet, and they have a cell phone, and they have a local TV, but it is very, very, very tightly controlled. So it's not just like when we talk about internet that we can access anything that we want. Their access is very, very controlled. So even if I wanted to show the film to people in Ozersk, it would not have been possible. And through the internet or streaming, it's not going to happen. They won't allow it. They won't allow this. But in terms of the agent, the law. As a documentary filmmaker, rule number one is that you do not offer money for interviews or the cooperation of people who work with you, because of reasons that you just can't pay it. So none of these people were paid, including Nadia. None of these people. The Russian the agent law is because she had and she continues to have this non-governmental agency, Planet of Hopes, and she was receiving up to a certain point, and then Putin, there was a new law, and they cut all the fundings from the non-governmental agencies to Russia. So she was receiving very little money from non-governmental agencies outside, in the West, and they stopped it, and they accused her of being a foreign agent. So that is a separate thing. But then they actually accused her, and she was talking to a few journalists. So she was giving interviews. I wasn't the only one. I think I was the only one who got in, but she gave to the outside. She gave interviews, but in terms of she being accused of nuclear espionage, I really cannot tell you. I know that they are aware of this film, whoever they is. But I know they're aware of it. They try to intimidate, they try to intimidate me to stop the film, and so I don't know whether it has anything to do when she was accused of nuclear espionage, because we got access to some highly sensitive information, and I'm not sure whether that has something to do with it.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap up very soon, but perhaps a couple of last questions, then we'll stop. So can I just get the two at the back, and then we'll have to finish, but you can talk to Samira afterwards. I'm sure she'd be like
Sure.
to talk to you.
Can I just ask a question about the anonymity of the man who's facing away from the camera? Can you say something about the negotiation that went on about that? Because it's obviously not that anonymous. You can see him quite clearly. Was he comfortable with that? And what was the kind of negotiation about that?
Okay, just hold on a moment. We'll just get the other ones up.
Just first of all, I'd like to say I thought it was magnificent.
Thank you so much.
Having made a film about Iran's nuclear capability, I'm in awe of what you've managed to achieve. A very straightforward question, actually. The archive, let alone what you managed to. How did you get the archive? Where did it come from? How could you solicit it? I'm interested in that. And just as an aside, when I made the Iran film, I went to Moscow to speak to Dr. Guskova. Dr. Guskova did a lot to do with, was the world's expert on radiation treatment, and she treated all the Chernobyl victims. She said to me that Iranians were coming over to learn from her. Now, I'm beginning to wonder where those victims came from, if it was just from Chernobyl. And I was going to ask you, obviously they must have had a lot of medical treatment within the village, and that within your film it talks about how things changed and actually declined, and maybe just something on that.
Sure. So can I answer your question first? That's the easier one. In terms of negotiation with the nuclear scientist, how did I negotiate with him to talk? Is that what you're referring? What negotiation?
The man with his face away from the camera.
Right.
It wasn't that anonymous.
Right.
So I was interested to know what negotiation there was about that. How sensitive.
What was the deal, in short?
The deal was that see, the thing is this: there was a moment that I cannot explain, that we arrived in this moment together, me and him, or me and Nadia, and for whatever reason they decided to talk, whether it was with their back towards the camera, whether it was with their, and the most important thing was that they knew that they are risking their lives. So he knew that, whether it's his back, obviously they can see from his back who it is. But what I cannot explain to you is that what happened in their head psychologically. I have my own interpretation of it. My interpretation of it is because they were thinking we are dying anyway. We are dying, and they trusted me, for whatever reason they trusted, to tell me their story. And I think that is that is the psychological reasons. So the rest of it is just, he maybe felt more comfortable, just because some people, even here, they don't like looking at the camera. So maybe it is just something like that. But other than that, he knew, all of them knew that they are risking their lives. And so it must have been just a matter of being more comfortable looking away. But in terms of your question, which was Iranian people getting there? Archives, yes. I have to say we worked about over a year a year and a half, because what was, again, very, very important to me, I knew that I have to show my audience the visual reference, that the historical context was very, very important. So for me, it was important to find a footage that I could give you for visual reference, the historical background and how we ended up here with this city. And I think one of the things that was very, very difficult to get, but we got very, very lucky, is Beria. Because Beria, who was the head of Stalin's secret police, and he was more scary than Stalin, he was actually executed maybe shortly after this footage was shot, and he was basically erased from the Soviet history. So even the Russians who saw this footage, I had a Russian scholar who was helping me, and they really, what I have to say, I got very, very, very lucky to work with people who really, really, really wanted to tell the story. So if I had two people who would bring me stuff, and there is actually, there's some stuff that, some of the archival footage that have not been out because Ozersk has a local TV station. And what we did, we had somebody to go inside the Ozersk TV station in the back rooms that they had all this stuff, and we had them look through some of the footage, and they just sent me stuff, and we had to and because it was really, really old and it was a different format, it took us a while just to transfer to be able to see. And so and I think all the work that went into it, it was worthwhile, and I'm happy with the result of the archival footage.
Yeah, and I think we all agree it was a fantastic film. Thank you, Samira, very much. You can talk to her afterwards. We can keep the conversation going. Thank you. It's a great film.
Thank you so much.
Well done. That was brilliant. I loved it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for really making it happen.
Not at all. I mean, you had an audience.